Welcome to the Talking HealthTech podcast. My name is Peter Birch. Today on the show, we're joined by Mecaela Couper, Specialist Solution Consultant for Healthcare, Colby Rook, Senior Account Executive for Healthcare, and Dr Greg McDavitt, Physician Executive and Director for Healthcare, all at ServiceNow. Team, how are we going?
Thank you.
We're doing wonderful.
Wonderful, thank you.
Great to have you here on the show. Really keen to dive in and talk about the role of artificial intelligence and reducing that administration burden and hopefully presenting some value to patients through that process. But there's a lot that we can unpack on that topic. It's really interesting to have all of you here from ServiceNow, but also with a clinical background. So I might actually get you to each introduce and give us a bit more context around that. Colby, would you be able to start? Tell us a bit about you and what you do and perhaps your background. We'll go from there.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Peter. So I've been with ServiceNow for just under a year, but I've got around 6 or 7 years experience in technology. Prior to that, I've got a clinical background in allied health as a chiropractor and a couple other manual therapies, and then in health and lifestyle coaching. So a long history of working with patients and clients to achieve health outcomes, and now replicating that with private and aged care customers here at ServiceNow.
Love it. Thank you. And Mecaela, I'm going to imagine all of this clinical experience that have kind of shaped how you think about technology too.
For sure. Thanks, Pete. So for me, I started in New Zealand for a couple of years as a radiation therapist. I spent 7 years in Australia and then a couple of years in the UK in the public and private sector as well, so treatment of cancer patients. And then in 2020, I actually left and joined an AI startup in London, consulting back mostly to the NHS about the COVID-related issues. And then last year came and joined ServiceNow. So I've been sort of here for about 6 months or so, really enjoying it so far as a specialist solution consultant in healthcare.
Love it. Yeah, definitely some interesting perspectives from around the world there to apply back here into Australia. We'll unpack that in a bit. What about yourself, Greg?
Yeah, so I've been here at ServiceNow for coming up on 4 years. So I lead our industry strategy within healthcare, based out of the States, for those that might not pick that up in my accent, but a physician by training. So, I went to med school in Arizona, trained in New York City, and then somehow found my way into consulting, healthcare technology consulting. And then from there, wound up in the tech sector specifically. So, I ended up making that migration primarily because of opportunity and, the bigger impact that tech can play in healthcare, more so than humans can. And we treat one patient at a time. When we're one-on-one with technology, we can really achieve some scale.
Yeah, there's a lot for us to talk about there. I want to come back to Colby for a second for now, though, and thinking about, I guess, what you've seen in your experience of being in that clinical world and then looking at technology and the role it can play there. Tell me about how you think about the role of technology these days and how it can really have an impact in healthcare, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. I think one of the most critical, irreplaceable parts of healthcare in general and the entire health industry is clinician presence. It's the ability to conduct a powerful patient experience, or whether that's a residential aged care experience, whatever that is, that interaction between frontline healthcare workers and the people that they serve is really, really critical. Finding a way to amplify that with technology, whether it be AI, automation, the right system to simplify clerical tasks, whatever it is, or potentially the right physical hardware tool to help get the job done for clinicians, that's what's really important. That's the hardest thing to replicate, but it's what matters most to patients and what matters most to their healthcare outcomes. So I think that's kind of the highest priority. And coming from that clinical background, specifically as a chiropractor, seeing that, that experience, that patient experience can make such a difference to how someone gets better, how they perceive the treatment that you're giving them, how compliant they are with their stretching program, with their rehabilitation program, their physiotherapeutics, whatever it is. So much of their healthcare success comes back to that being a positive experience. So amplifying that, giving time back to clinicians so they can, improve that presence, improve that experience with their patients. That's what's critical and most important, I think.
Yeah, I think there's some important framing that comes out of that for me too, is that when we think about let's implement some technology and healthcare to improve patient outcomes, one might automatically think, well, this is technology that patients might see, or it's a computer they're engaging with, or, there's machines and all of that. But there's so much technology behind the scenes that can be implemented to then help the clinicians to deliver that better patient care. Am I kind of in the right direction there?
Yeah, that's right. I think the most powerful digital transformation in healthcare is invisible. It's the one that the patient never really sees because the other parts of their experience with their healthcare provider is improving. I work a lot with aged care organisations here in Australia with my current role at ServiceNow, and there was a study that came out in 2023 that found that frontline nursing staff for aged care organisations spend between 37 to 38% of their time just doing manual, document-based clerical activities and handovers. So you can imagine that being able to kind of take that time back and dedicating it to higher value tasks involved in providing direct patient care, that's the impact that patients want. And that's the impact that they're going to see by, powerful technology. It's not so much a flashy new piece of hardware or software that they get to interact with directly. It's about freeing up the burden for the frontline workers they interact with.
And I guess a lot of clinicians didn't become clinicians to spend 40% of their time filling out paperwork. So, that's an important one to address. You touched on some of these examples of technology, and artificial intelligence is very front and center at the moment in healthcare. Where are you seeing that best applied in healthcare today? What would you hope that, say, clinics can best utilize of artificial intelligence to really have that impact you're talking about?
Yeah, so I'll give another example. One of the other customer groups that I work with is GP clinic networks. And they've noticed that between 2023 and 2024, the percentage of GPs who are potentially thinking of leaving practice and leaving the industry due to serious concerns about administrative burden has increased by 10% from 60% to 70%. So that's huge, right? That's obviously impacting the quality of care that they give. It's obviously hugely impactful for their future in those careers, which is a part of the healthcare industry. We're always looking for new capable GPs here in Australia. So I think that in those cases, something as simple as an X-ray referral, pharmaceutical, prescription process, or logging and expanding on case notes. If you think about when you go to your GP, how many minutes do you burn at the beginning of the consultation with them going back through your medical history, going back through your consultation history, providing a powerful, AI capability that can summarize that can pick up the really critical key data points and provide it to the clinician in a very small piece of time or a very small period of time, so that they can then focus those minutes back on the things that matter with interacting with the patients, being present and providing that more powerful level of care. That's, I guess, one of the biggest use cases in that subsector of the industry.
Yeah. And Mecaela, if I think about, let's inject more technology into healthcare, the risk that we run of taking that very high level approach could be that, there's a lot of talk about technology and not a lot of talk about humans, but I feel like there's kind of a balance that can be brought there. And it sounds like from your clinical experience, that human element has kind of always been central to it. Tell me a little bit more about that from your side.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, basically. I think where we're at with technology is not necessarily thinking about the end user enough. So their workflows in their day-to-day, a lot of the time involve technologies throughout the day, different point solutions, different systems that they're engaging with, a lot of logins, not even necessarily just systems. So they could be engaging with spreadsheets, phone calls, mini huddle meetings, patient flow meetings. And all of these things lead to, overwhelm and burden, that Colby referred to. I think what it comes down to for clinicians such as myself that have left the profession is what we can offer is to kind of come in as almost like a translator and offer that discovery piece. So kind of get in on the ground with the clinicians. The leadership often knows the change that they want to make, the efficiencies that they want to gain, but sometimes don't really know how to achieve that. So what I've found in the last 5 years is I'll typically spend a couple of days on site, with the people sort of going through the process, whether it be sort of pharmaceuticals, oncology, patient flow, and just making sure that I follow all of those processes and map the as-is process out before thinking about what solution might actually fit for the problem.
And I think about, even from my own experience in healthcare, one thing that you're always striving for as a patient is that human interaction with a clinician. And it could almost feel a bit like obvious to say, but, there's it feels like there are less humans who are the clinicians who are available to do the clinicianing. In Australia, we're lucky compared to other parts of the world that in terms of the amount of clinicians we have, but that's still not enough. And so as the pressure continues to increase, we're going to have to look to other tools to be able to do more of that humaning on the clinician side. But at the same time, to get, say, artificial intelligence to do that, the last thing someone's going to want to do is engage with something that feels artificial or it's insensitive. How do we find that balance between bringing in that artificial intelligence and the tools to elevate that human side?
Yeah, that's so important. And what you said, I really felt in the profession. So sort of starting 12 years ago, 15 years ago now, actually, in the profession, I found I was maybe treating 20 or so patients a day. And then that kind of increased to 30, sometimes in the UK, 40 patients a day. And what that can mean is just shorter and shorter slots. There's a lot of automation involved, with what we're actually using in terms of the physical technology, but what's not in place is the systems behind the scenes that sort of supports the clinicians to be able to have more time with their patients. I remember doing a survey just to find out from patients, what they would like to see improve within their care. And what I actually found was really interesting. They found that the clinicians that actually referred to them by name throughout their procedure, they really found that helped their journey. And I think that small piece within the day of giving kind of that human connection back is so important. So spending the time that I had to spend sort of rebooking a whole day's worth of appointments is the kind of thing that I see AI supporting. 30 patients having to rebook them because, in my field, a linear accelerator going down is not an easy thing to do. And it's a big burden on clinicians. So yeah, that's really where I see, those processes being supported.
I feel like there's probably, on one side getting the right tools in place, but in the end, like you say, you've got 40 patients to see in a day. The last thing you're going to want to do is like, oh, hey, good news, there's a new system for you to use, which is going to help. There's always that learning curve, right? And there's the support that the team needs and the clinicians need in order to be able to utilize technology. So I guess in implementing some of these solutions, working with those clinicians up front in that co-design piece is going to be really important as well.
Yeah, exactly right. So, before joining ServiceNow, I'm kind of more in the pre-sales side of things now, but before now, I've got a lot of experience sort of in the delivery and the product development side of things. And I find that there's these iterative loops where, what you think someone's going to do with technology is not exactly what they're going to do when it's put in practice. So it's learning from that. It's taking the opportunity to really sit down with the clinicians that are going to be using the technology and making sure that you roll back in changes into the product as people use it. So, really studying that. And we have people in ServiceNow that do that sort of full time. Me, myself, I'm kind of taking those solutions and making sure that I can kind of tailor them to fit the use case. But that delivery, really needs to factor in that transformation piece and the fact that already people are, burdened by a lot of different technology in their roles. So even things like single sign-in makes such a difference to people. I remember when I had a card and being able to kind of tap that to log into a system, it made such a difference to my day, not having to type in my login. So simple changes.
I feel like that's a big lesson to take away sometimes too, especially if you're looking at implementing across a large system. Your mind might go to, well, what's the big transformative tool that we can implement to really have an impact? If you speak to the front line and find out that, well, it's just a simple matter of changing to something else, that it could actually be a relatively low lift in terms of even investment of be it financial, but also time to do, you can really have those step changes. And I think that not only has that impact on the efficiency side, but you start to build that trust and credibility internally, which is going to be really important to get the implementation side too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Those smaller pieces, it's just really understanding, for example, I've seen a lot of work go into the discharge planning space from the front door, from admission, and you wouldn't necessarily think of that needing to take place right at the front door. But, knowing that you could actually bring that in and factor that in right at the beginning of a patient's journey within hospital, and that would improve, their outcome, the efficiency of the service that they're gaining, and their patient care overall to get to the right place at the right time. I think that small parts of the journey and kind of not maybe what you're expecting to make the difference really do.
And so, Greg, you would have seen, some of this too, obviously at a clinical level, but I think about some of these challenges we're talking about. Yes, they're very healthcare specific, but every industry is kind of facing this kind of thing where we need to do more with less, or we need to get the engagement of the front line and also engage consumers or from our side, the patients in that journey as well. Where do you see healthcare in that picture compared to other parts of industry overall?
Yeah, fair question. Healthcare as an industry, especially the large organizations, are all very ambitious about AI. But over the last year, even internally, we've conducted several surveys in terms of readiness to adopt AI. Healthcare is actually beginning to lag again, which for a lot of us probably not a surprise, because healthcare often lags in the new technology adoption space compared to other industries. And I think that's something that we all need to really come to grips with. We need to change that as an industry. We need to embrace the change that is coming for this, especially with artificial intelligence, because I'm not 100% sure, but I am fairly confident healthcare probably has the largest repository of data versus any other industry. And that's what drives AI, right? Whether it's generative or agentic or whatever it is, we have so many touch points with so many people, and the data is inputted from so many different stakeholders that repository is enormous. And so we have that advantage. I think it will make a much larger impact to the way we deliver care as enterprise organizations, and also the way people consume it. I think it's going to happen on both sides. The barrier that I'm seeing is that people don't know where to start, and they're scared. Their jobs are at risk here, if something goes wrong. And then, of course, we are always bound or restricted by regulation, right? We have all of these requirements around data privacy, data security, which are not bad. They are just challenges when we get into this space where we say we're going to use all that data to make us work faster, better, smoother, have better outcomes, whatever it is. But we really need to embrace that is what I've seen from the executives across our customer base. And they all want to, but they're a little bit in the dark on how to do it.
Yeah, you're right. And I think also a big part of that is, on that side of being conservative or risk averse and all of those things that are very true in healthcare, a lot of that comes down to trust, I find, as well. And, as an industry, I feel like we can be doing a better job at building that trust with, making that trust kind of pervasive throughout all of the work that we do with technology, because I guess we've all been burnt before, and there's different people there. And as you say, there's everything's quite high stakes. Be it, there's protective roles on the line, but also, patients' lives at stake as well. So how do we even go about that journey of instilling a lot of trust in how we utilize technology in healthcare?
Yeah. I would be very arrogant if I said I knew the exact answer to that. But I'll give you my perspective. I think both Colby and Mecaela made good points around the patient experience. Healthcare is probably one of a few industries, I don't know of another one, where our customer, the patient, doesn't ever want to engage with us, right? There's not very many patients out there that say, I want to be in the hospital. I want to be at the clinic. Why would you want to take time out of your day to be there? So I think one of the steps that we do have to take is around giving time back, right? That establishes some level of trust that we recognize their time is important. It's painful sometimes to come through the healthcare system. And this is global, right? This isn't a Australia problem or a US problem. Everywhere I go, it is a problem. It is a painful process. So I think we need to build some trust with our patients that as we put these things in place, it's actually making things easier and more convenient for them, right? And that we're focused on them personally, which I think is the other side of this AI opportunity. The computer is going to know exactly who you are. They're going to arguably know more than I do as a physician. Even if I'm your GP and I've seen you for 20 years, I also have 500 other patients have seen for 20 years. So, I may know Pete, but I probably only know you for the past 2 appointments that I've seen you with. AI will know everything. And so you can take into account a lot more and consider a lot more at your personal level. I think that's a real opportunity to engage with the patient on the provider side, on the enterprise company side, or the physician side. I think it's honestly very similar, giving them time back. And Colby mentioned this, we don't know what they're going to do with that time, but they don't have to be working, right? Or they could be seeing more patients. They could be spending more time with their families. And I think in the environment of who do we work for, right? We either run our own practice or we work for a large organization. Man, it starts to feel like they care about our lives again, right? Not just, hey, we have this new piece of technology that's supposed to help you, but by the way, you have to engage with it 100% more.
Yeah. Right.
And that feels a little bit lopsided. It goes back to the burnout issue.
I think just coming back to the topic of trust, I think healthcare as an industry, AI literacy for practitioners is probably far ahead of a bunch of other industries that I've worked with in the past in my tech career. And I think there's much more of a realization with the healthcare organizations that I'm working with that they need to kind of put a firm governance and control in place of the tools that are being used. So we see this a lot. We'll have CISOs engage with ServiceNow and go, well, look, we know that practitioners or whoever it may be are using these kind of freely available, easily accessible AI model tools on their own personal either, account or whatever that is. And of course, it's I guess only logical to preserve any patient data from the use of that platform personally, but it's not always the case. Things slip through, and whether intentional or unintentional, they're just not good guardrails in place. And one of the things that we help a lot of our customers with now is putting a control tower in place that manages that governance, manages the use of, that kind of shadowware, and allows for, more governed, more secure channels to use those capable AI tools in the right way. But yeah, it's in terms of trust, I guess, working with not necessarily ServiceNow, but organizations like us who really understand the ethical implications of the use of AI for industries like healthcare, to build a firm governance is really important.
I think what's really important in that governance, because that's critical, in lieu of understanding something, people then will go to the worst case example, and particularly at a board level where you're responsible for, overall the organization. If there's not that understanding or the transparency, then the default is going to be, well, let's go back to what we know. So I feel like that's going to be a really important part, is the education piece throughout healthcare as we implement some of these new tools. That's really front and center. Everyone feels comfortable in what they're doing, and I guess what the next step is in the chain as well, because there's the thing you're doing in your part of healthcare, but then that has knock-ons, and that's going to be really important. As we start to round out the conversation, I'd love to get from each of you, perhaps if there's one thing you would hope that a healthcare leader or someone within the healthcare system can take away, or at least starts to think about in implementing new tools within healthcare to address some of these issues around efficiency or improving patient engagement, because it doesn't just happen at the top, it happens throughout the system. There's always something that each person can do within the healthcare system. So I might start with you, Colby. If there's one thing you hope someone takes away from this conversation and can implement in their healthcare setting, what might that be?
Yeah, so I think doing a lot of detailed internal discovery with frontline workers and what's important to them is critical, because, it's very easy to implement a high-level AI strategy that looks good in a board paper, and that has maybe some value metrics propped up around that are either financial or productivity, whatever. But what matters most in healthcare businesses, as we've said, is the presence and the improvement in quality of care, right? That's critical. If you look at the board papers or annual reports from any healthcare organization, it's always front and center. And that comes down to the quality of care that's being given on those front lines, and that's being taken away from with administrative burden. So, I think that would be the thought bubble, is spend as much time as possible with your frontline workers, one-to-one interviews, whatever it takes, to really understand the breadth of the problem before putting in place a either platform or advisory-based solution. And that's whether that's AI, more broad automation, or something massive like a HR information system.
What about you, Greg?
I think Colby's point around all of this is well taken. I think that's a very important thing. I think for me, a large issue is, or a large key takeaway is that when you look to address some of these challenges with technology, don't do it in a silo. That's what we've done in healthcare for decades. We will solve a problem in a clinic, in an environment, for a person or a group of people without any consideration, or with minimal consideration, on what it does to or how it impacts the rest of our business, right? A lot of our ancillary staff, they might not operate in the clinical space, right? A lot of our back office, middle office personnel, they all have to deal with the consequences of what we just did. So I think you need to approach this with a broader strategic enterprise vision, that as we change things in the clinical space, it will trickle down to revenue cycle. It'll trickle down to administration. It'll trickle down to intake and all of these different parts of our business. In the hospital, it'll touch biomed, it'll touch pharmacy, it'll touch all of these different areas that nobody sees, but all of a sudden they have a new problem because of what we did. And so we really need to take that approach. And again, AI is a hot topic here. I think AI, that is a real critical value. You need to be able to workflow throughout your enterprise and put that intelligence everywhere, and keep that as a key consideration as you do so.
I like that one. What about you, Mecaela?
So typically projects and transformations happening all over, the healthcare sector. And I think it's about taking lessons learned from all of those that are existing already. So it's understanding, within my healthcare setting, what's already taking place, what's working well, what's not. And to Colby's point, making sure you do a deep discovery on, where the gaps are and what's needed. Also, to Greg's point, acknowledging that there's sectors outside of, I think a lot of people think of the hospital and the secondary sector first, but, the primary sector is engaging with the secondary sector. It's just understanding, how are those patient referrals coming in, for example, and how can we improve that workflow from primary to secondary care, and then the patient being discharged as well. So throughout that kind of patient journey, what can we optimize and where? And it could be that there are some things that are actually already, as I said, working well. So, not changing those and kind of taking those lessons learned to other projects is important.
Yeah. And I think building on that, Mecaela, being able to, from an executive level within a healthcare system, trying to build that culture within that the front line has the channels or feels confident in sharing opportunities for improving efficiencies or tweaks to workflows that might be 1%ers but will have that transformational impact. And while they may not have the answer as to what the technological solution is for that, if there needs to be one, you've got that channel through, and then hopefully at the front line you feel like you can make an impact, because there are plenty of examples where transformational workflows have come through from that feedback.
Exactly right. And I think the best meetings I've been a part of, there's been clinician presence, and that could be across different specialties, but also patient presence as well. So some meetings where they are engaged on a monthly basis and they're letting the hospital or the clinic know sort of what their engagement's been like to date, whether or not they've had treatment, in the last couple of years, and how that's kind of gone for them, where they see room for improvement is I think, really important part of the conversation.
Totally. Lots of valuable lessons out of that conversations. There'll be full details in the show notes of this episode for people to check out and learn more about ServiceNow and see some other content on our website as well. So, Greg, Mecaela, Colby, I really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking HealthTech. Make sure you like and subscribe, and share this episode with someone who might find it valuable. For more information and resources about healthcare innovation, visit talkinghealthtech.com.